Alrighty. Everybody, I'm Kasey Jorgenson, the broker of Jorgenson Real Estate, and we are doing this video, which we've done, I think, 4 or 5 years in a row, with Mr. Cohen here. And so we work with Ryan Cohen, who is an attorney. He's based out of Bexar County, Texas, and he started a company that is technically called Protest Tax or protesttax.com, right? Yep. And most of the time, Ryan and his firm is who we send our clients to so they can act as an agent during their property tax protest, which we will talk more about, but which we recommend to do pretty much every single year. And so Ryan's our guy, and we like to get him on here so he can tell us kind of an overview for anybody that may not know, and also talk about any changes or things that we might look to expect for 2026, especially since those assessed values were recently mailed out for most counties. I think all counties have it out at this point. So
most counties, all the good counties, the ones that are stragglers, they take their time.
Yeah. If you have any questions as we go through, so we've got the settings set up to keep everyone's mics off so we don't have accidental disruptions. There's a chat function and also a Q&A. So feel free to ask any questions there. And we have our agents here as well that they can chime in and answer questions, and anything that isn't answered or that Ryan wants to kind of address, we'll hit as we kind of go through. So Ryan, want to kick us off? Show us the deets.
Yeah, let's do it.
All
right, thanks, Kasey. So thank you everyone for joining today. I know I'm gonna run through this. I've got a PowerPoint that I like to put up, and I'll go through it quickly, as quickly as I can. If you have any questions along the way pertaining to what I'm talking about, feel free to put it in the chat. I'll periodically look at it just because it might be relevant to everybody if they have the same question. If not, we'll keep the questions toward the end. But let's just kind of jump through it. I'll share my screen and go through this PowerPoint and teach you all about property taxes, how to protest them, and go from there. Everyone can see that screen, correct?
Looks good.
Okay, cool. So my name is Ryan Cohen. I have a company called Protest Tax, protesttax.com. There's my email, ryan@protesttax, and my phone number in case you have any questions you want to reach out to me that you didn't get to ask. You can call me, 210-267-9984. Well, happy to answer, or just shoot me an email. So just want to give you a brief introduction about myself. I'm from San Antonio. I was born here. I graduated from UTSA, University of Texas, San Antonio. I did spend a couple of years up at UT in Austin. And then after undergrad, I went to A&M School of Law, which is in Fort Worth. Graduated in 2015, worked as a commercial litigation associate for the first few years after graduating. But then I opened my own practice in 2017. I bought the domain protesttax.com back in law school, probably in 2014, because I had a professor who brought in one of his previous clients. I never knew anything about protesting property taxes. I thought that might be something I could do in the future. I held on to the domain and then made it part of my practice, and that area has kind of grown and grown. I decided to focus 100% of my efforts on growing my brand, Protest Tax, and it's been pretty successful for us lately. Just last year, we represented over $2.3 billion in market value in 2025 throughout Texas. So even though my main office is here in Bexar County, we were in, I think, 90 different counties in Texas last year. A majority of counties are in South Texas, I would say, from Bexar County up through Williamson County, Bell County, all the way to Houston, New Essex County. We even had a good amount of properties in Dallas, Tarrant County last year as well. Just a quick disclaimer, I'm an attorney, but most of this is not legal advice. Most of this could be found either in the Texas Constitution, Property Code, Tax Code, or in the State Comptroller's Office. So let's kind of roll through today's topics. I'll give you a brief overview of property taxes. There's a calendar that's pretty important, and then we'll go into the exemptions. I'll briefly touch on exemptions such as the Homestead over 65 exemptions. I know a lot of people have questions about that. And then we'll talk about the appraisal methods. How is Williamson County appraising your value, whether you have a single family home, a rental, a small apartment, or maybe a commercial building, stuff like that. And then if you want to protest yourself, how to file a protest, the timeline, what to expect, how to prepare for those hearings, and then just kind of let you know how our firm could help as well. And Kasey, feel free to jump in whenever you like, but I'll keep kind of going through it.
Got
Okay,
it.
so property taxes. Let's talk about them, right? And I don't want to bore you, so again, I'll try to run through this quickly. But Texas has no state property tax, and there's no state income tax either. And so what does that mean? I'm sure y'all are aware that Texas doesn't have a state income tax, but no property tax. So on your tax bill that you get for your ad valorem taxes, there's no line item that says state of Texas 1%, right? It says school district 1%, the county, the roads, the healthcare system, the river authority. Those are all of the taxing units that make up your tax rate, right? So the local governments set the tax rates and they collect the property taxes. And that's what we use to pay for the schools, the streets, the roads, the police, fire protection, and other services. So there's no state income tax, there's no state property tax, and that's why property taxes are so high. Texas law does require that values are uniform and equal. We want to make sure that you're paying your fair share. And so at the end of the day, what it comes down to is your tax bill that you get is the appraised value of your property times that by the tax rates that make up your tax bill. In Texas, from what I've seen, the tax rates are usually about 2%. Half of that is the school district. That makes up a majority of your tax bill. And so our goal, again, is to reduce the appraised value so that tax bill that you get at the end of the year is as low as possible. So here's the calendar phase published by the Comptroller's Office. I'll touch on a few key dates starting at the very first of the year, January 1st. That's a key date. And that's the date that the district is required to appraise your property, right? So for 2026, what was your property's condition on January 1st? Most importantly, if you were in the process of building a property, let's say you're in the middle of building and it was 75% complete on January 1st, and then you move into it in March. Well, you want to make sure that that the appraisal district has your property at 75% complete. You shouldn't be paying 100% complete property for a property that on January 1st wasn't complete, right? And so January 1st is kind of the key date. If you have any evidence that you bring to your hearing, such as photos, if you could timestamp them around January 1st, that would be great. So January 1st through, I would say, March 30th is when the appraisal district is going out into the field, as they call it, and deciding what the value is of your property. They're appraising your property. That's why it's the appraisal phase. The equalization phase is afterwards. That's when we're in protest hearing. So another key date that I kind of skipped was April 1st is the notice of appraised values gets sent out to the property owners. That's the district letting you know how much they are appraising your property for. And then on that notice of appraised value, it will usually say protest deadline May 15th, right? So right now is when we are filing protest, and you must file your protest by May 15th or 30 days after the district sends you that notice of appraised value. So when May 15th comes around, all of our protests will have been filed, and then we are scheduled to attend the protest hearings from May, June, July, August, September, right? So this calendar isn't 100% accurate, but this is what the Comptroller's Office releases. So during the equalization phase is when we are making sure that everything is equal and fair, is when we're conducting the protest hearings. So again, that's usually during the summer months. And then everything has to be certified by October for the tax bills to be issued in October. So it's kind of a backwards process. The tax bills that come out in October are based on the values that we achieve for you at your protest hearings. So, and then again, once those tax bills are sent out in October, they're usually due and payable the following January. So I think January 31st are when most tax bills are due. And then if you do have there may be an option to pay it in half payments. If you do pay it in half payments, I do believe you have to make half of a payment by the end of November, and then the other half is due in June. If you are over 65, you may also qualify for deferred tax payments or also a 10-month plan. At least I know in Bexar County, but it should be a statewide tax offering that they do allow. So again, kind of the few key dates: January 1st, what was the property's condition? May 15th is the protest deadline, and we're usually done through protest by October, so the tax bills can come out at that time.
And if somebody wants to hire your firm to help them, or any firm, about
Yeah.
how much lead time do they need to contact you to kind of have you do that for them?
Yeah, so we kind of have a cutoff date of May 13th, just because we don't want to be scrambling at the last second. But we've already filed, we've got about 5,500 properties so far this year, and we've filed about 80% of them. And so if you were thinking about hiring us, the sooner the better. But you have about 2.5 weeks at that point.
Gotcha.
So exemptions, so on the two things that you can do to really reduce your property taxes besides filing a protest are exemptions. Matt, I see your question. I'll answer that one at the kind of towards the end of how much our fees cost and everything like that. But so kind of going back to exemptions. So exemptions are just tools that help you lower your property tax bill. The most common exemption is your homestead exemption. And then there's a homestead over 65 exemption. So if you are over 65 or you are turning 65, then you qualify for the homestead over 65 exemption. So when I say turning 65, so if your birthday is December 31st of this year and you're turning 65 on December 31st, you would still qualify for the over 65 exemption right now. It is for the entire year. It's just the year you turn 65. You don't have to wait until you are 65 to qualify for it. Besides the main homestead and over 65 homestead, there's a disability homestead and then a disabled veteran homestead. I know San Antonio is Military City, USA. We've got a lot of disabled vets here. If you are a 100% disabled veteran, then you don't pay any property taxes here in the state of Texas. Regarding the appraisal method, actually, let me go back real quick because exemptions, it is important. You can apply retroactively for a homestead exemption for up to 2 years. So if you have not applied for a homestead, or if you're not sure, contact me or Kasey. We can look it up on the appraisal district's website. It's free to file. If you move into a property, you'll probably get swarmed with a bunch of solicitations saying, pay me $200 and I'll file your homestead. That's a scam. It's free to file. So let's assume you moved into your property in 2024 and you still haven't filed for your homestead. You can apply for it right now. On the top of the application, it'll ask you if you're filing a late application. You'll check yes. And then under tax years applying, you'll put 2024, 2025, 2026. You send all exemption applications to the appraisal district. And then once it gets picked up by the tax assessor's office, if for some reason, let's assume you didn't have a homestead exemption, but you are retroactively adding one back, they'll cut you a check for your overpayment the last couple of years, right? So when I see that, the first thing when I get a new client is I check to see if they have any exemptions on the property. And if I don't see any exemptions, I'll let them know that they may qualify for one.
And I will add to that if you have a mortgage and you are late on that homestead exemption and you get that filed, it will lenders and mortgage servicers typically only analyze your tax account once a year. And so you may not see like an immediate change in a monthly payment with your mortgage, but the next time they analyze it, hopefully it kind of gets caught up.
Yeah, so what Kasey is talking about is the escrow analysis that gets performed every year. So, every month we're putting money into our escrow for property taxes and homeowners insurance. So when that tax bill gets paid by your lender in January and they renew your homeowners insurance, they're saying, okay, how much money did Ryan have in his escrow this year? Was there enough or was there not enough? Was there a shortage or a surplus? Our goal is to, again, keep your taxes down as low as possible. Theoretically, and realistically, your value should appreciate over time. But we're doing is kind of controlling the value, that we don't want it to go up 10% every year. If we could keep it the same or get it down, great, but realistically, you may see small increases, but what you're really preventing are those huge 10% jumps year over year. Okay, so you've got a property, and how is the appraisal district appraising my property? How are they coming up with the value? Well, again, most property is to be appraised on January 1st, and they have to appraise it at market value. It's per the tax code. Market value is at the value at which a property would transfer for cash or cash equivalent. So if it was on the MLS and it was a sold property, that's the market value. You're setting the value, right? Just the definition, it's exposed on the open market. Both buyer and seller know all the uses and purposes of the property, and they want to maximize their gains, really. So if it was a private sale, let's say it wasn't on the MLS, you got it from your uncle and he sold it to you for cheap, right? Unfortunately, that might not be considered market value because it wasn't exposed on the open market. And so if you bring the settlement statement saying, I just bought it for $200,000, well, they may look at that with a grain of salt just because they know that might not be the true market value. But the easiest cases for us or for you, if you want to protest, if you just bought your home, then show them the settlement statement. If it was purchased for less than what the district has, 99% of the time, they'll at least honor the sales price the first year after you purchase the property. And so the three most common approaches that the district is required to use is the market approach, which again is for single family homes, the income approach, which are for income producing properties, and then the cost approach, which if it doesn't fit into the first two categories, what's the cost? How much did it cost to build a property, or how much would it cost to replace the property? Those are the three main methods. So I guess I'll go back to this real quick. So for single family homes, again, we're talking about market approach. So sales in your neighborhood, right? We don't want to pull comps from a neighborhood across the highway that may have completely different property types than what you might have in your neighborhood. So if you are looking at sales, you want to stick to your neighborhood. And as far as timeline goes, they are allowed to look 12 months back plus the first 3 months of this year. So for 2026 protests, our sales that we include in our sales packet will include any sale from 2025 and also the first quarter of 2026.
And anybody that works with us, our website also has access for you to view sold properties. All you have to do is register, which we already have your information anyway. So just register and you can get in there and you can access sold properties as well.
Yeah. So let me skip ahead. Yeah, okay, I do talk about that. So let me go back to this. Okay, so how do we file a protest? So let's assume you want to do it yourself. You should be able to file it electronically or in writing. There is forms on every appraisal district's website that says notice of protest form. And maybe we can pull the Williamson County's notice of protest. I didn't include it on here, but we should be able to go to the internet and pull that up and we can look at that together. But the appraisal district does have forms available. You're not required to use one, but you should use it. It must identify the property owner and the subject property and indicate that the property owner is dissatisfied, which there are options that you can select as for the reasons of protest. And the first option usually is incorrect market value or value unequal with others. Those are two separate protest reasons. We used to have to check two separate boxes, but now most appraisal districts combine them into one. And the incorrect market value, that's the market argument. And then the value unequal with other is the equity argument. So the market argument is, look at these sales. That's clearly over market. And then the unequal with other, that's the equity side of things. That is not sales, but your neighbors. Why is my neighbor paying more than I am, right? So there's a market and equity argument. And so when the district produces their evidence, they will have a market value for your property, and then they will also have an equity value for your property. And they are required to use the lower of the two values. So most important thing is that you must file the notice of protest before May 15th or no later than 30 days after the date the appraisal district has mailed the notice of appraised value, whichever is later. And funny little story, I've gotten quite a few notices of appraised values to my office because I'm tagged as the agent. And one of the notice of appraised values said that the protest deadline was May 14th. And I was like, that can't be right. That's not per the code. And so I called them, knowing that I know that I'm right. And I was like, hey, why does your notice of appraised value say May 14th? You're like, because we mailed it out, April 14th or whatever it is. I was like, yeah, but it's 30 days or May 15th, whichever is later. So they spoke with their supervisor, came back, yep, you're right, sorry. So kind of gave them a heads up that don't deny a protest if it's on May 15th, because it is May 15th or 30 days after the notices sent out, whichever is later. So I think Williamson County sent their notices out at the end of March, if I'm not mistaken. So 30 days would be April 30th, but again, it's going to be May 15th because that's the later of the two dates. Okay, so as I mentioned, on that notice of protest form, you have to check off the reasons what you're protesting. The two main reasons are that incorrect market value or value unequal with others. Always select that option. There are other options you can select, such as a denial of an exemption, denied or modified exemption, a change in ag use, failure to provide notice, or any other adverse action. But really, I've never selected any other reasons for protest except for those market and equity reasons. But you got to select them or you don't get to argue them.
Well, I
And
will
so,
say
okay.
that there was one section about the appraisal data. So if for anybody that's watching this or here now, when you purchase or refinance the house with a loan and you have an appraisal done, that appraiser that the lender hires for you will measure the square footage of your property. And so that's an important piece of information that we can go and use. If the county thinks you're 3,200 square feet, but you're actually 3,025 square feet, that's a difference that can be used to correct and adjust the value.
And you could still select the incorrect market or appraised value or unequal, and then you can bring that evidence at the protest hearing, which is what we do. And that's a very good point because we do get that that evidence quite a bit. And the only way to change that is if we have a blueprint of the property, or we have a sketch of the property, or we ask the appraiser to go into the property and go sketch it themselves, right? So that's one way to change it. If it's just off by 50 feet or so, usually we'll just negotiate a value for that. But if it's hundreds and hundreds of square feet difference, then that is something, the only way that we get that change is by asking for our property owners to provide blueprints or to schedule time to get it sketched out. So, all right, so you've got your notice of protest or your notice of appraised value. You want to file your notice of protest, and then you do file it before the May 15th. You'll be scheduled for two different hearings, the informal and the formal hearing. So after you're right there, after you file your protest, you'll be scheduled for the informal hearing first. That's your chance to work with an appraiser one-on-one. And that's when you present your evidence. And if you agree to a value, you'll sign a settlement and waiver, and then you're done, right? The formal hearing is if you can't settle your case informally, you are usually scheduled for a formal hearing 2 weeks after the informal hearing date. Sometimes it's directly after. I think in Williamson County, it's one hearing date, and they say if you want to speak with an appraiser informally, show up early, or they let you do that automatically right away. I think I really like how Williamson County does it because they do give you one date, and then they let you speak with an appraiser automatically. They say, okay, come back, let's go talk. And then that's your informal hearing. If y'all sit down at his desk and y'all can't hash it out, then y'all will walk together and go to the formal hearing. And the formal hearing is, instead of you with an appraiser one-on-one, it's you versus the appraiser. And then there's 3 members of the appraisal review board, and they're the ones that hear your case. And that's when, you kind of make your case, right? I always suggest let the appraisal district go first, let them present their case, and then you present your case, and then y'all will each get a rebuttal. The reason I say that, besides just negotiation tactic, is the appraisers have a lot of protests that they're doing every day. They don't know what property they're going to talk about next. So if you go first, that gives them an opportunity to kind of pull their stuff and kind of get their ducks in line. Rather, you let them go first. They're kind of like, okay, let's see. Okay, what kind of evidence do we have? Oh, we don't have evidence. Let me creates them real quick, kind of throws them off guard a little bit. So if you do go to a formal hearing, always let them go first. That's just, very common for them to do so.
And the appraisal review board, Ryan, is that the one that it's made up of volunteers?
Yeah, not volunteers because they are getting paid, but
Oh, they do get paid.
yes,
Okay.
they do get paid a per diem, probably like $150 a day. I'm not making any assumptions, but most of the appraisal review board members are retired individuals that want to hear protests all day. They're not employed by the appraisal district. That's a letter they have to read. We are not employees of the appraisal district. We are hired to represent our, their constituents or whatever it is, right? Their neighbors, right? They have to live in the county that they're representing. Formal ARB members, I think they can serve 2 3-year terms, so there are term limits. But it's good for us because when I go to the appraisal districts, I go in person to these formal hearings. It's building relationships with them. They see me every day. So it's a good idea to go in person for these hearings. On the notice of protest, you can elect if you do go to the ARB, whether you want to be in person, through Zoom, a teleconference, or you can even file what's called an affidavit of evidence, which is basically, it's a form that you fill out and that they read it in front of everyone at the appraisal review board hearing. So you don't even have to go in person if you don't want to. I kind of go off topic a little bit, but I want to talk about those notice of appraised values. So again, you're supposed to get your notice of appraised value every April 1st, but you might not get it if your value does not go up by more than $1,000. I forgot to mention that. The district is not required to send a notice of appraised value unless your value goes up by more than $1,000. So I know here in at least Bexar County, a lot of values stayed the same or went down in value. So they sent out, I think, a record low number of notice of appraised values this year. But still, you have the right to protest no matter whether your value goes up, down, or remains flat year over year. Just wanted to mention that. So you got the hearing date, you filed your protest, you're scheduled in to speak to Williamson County. What do you bring to your hearings? Well, you want to bring evidence. You can't just show up and say, my home's overappraised. I want this value because I think that's what it's worth. For residential properties, you want to make sure you bring the market sales data. So for 2026 protests, we're looking at sales from January 1st through March 31st of this year. Those are relevant sales. Don't bring a sale from 2024 or earlier. That's just not material. And then personal evidence. They don't know what the inside or the outside of your home looks like. So if you have any cracks on the walls, on the interior, exterior foundation issues, you have a water spot on your ceiling, if you have electrical issues, plumbing issues, if you have invoices, receipts, quotes, anything like that could reduce your value, you want to bring that information. If you just replace your roof, you might think, oh, I don't want to show them that I just spent $20,000 because now it's better than it was. It's common that they'll at least give you that amount off for this year's protest. They may not be dollar for dollar, but if you bring a $20,000 roof replacement invoice, they'll usually give you 50 cents on the dollar and knock off 10K off the value for this year's protest.
And I think that it's worth mentioning one thing here, because this, especially people not from Texas, it seems counterintuitive to say we want to show as little value as possible at these things. It's important to mention this, which I do every year. What the county has for the assessed value of your property means absolutely nothing for your actual value of the property. The goal here is for you to make your property tax bill as small as possible, and that will make the property more desirable for future buyers, and it will save you real money every single month and every single year.
Exactly. When markets shot up in 2022, people were paying hundreds of thousands of dollars over what the appraisal districts had for market value, at least I know in Travis County, right? So again, exactly what Kasey mentioned. What we do at a hearing is just reducing the assessed value for taxation purposes. And if there's a potential buyer and they're deciding between your home and your neighbor's home, and your home has $10,000 in taxes and your neighbor has $15,000, it might be more appealing to a buyer to go with the lower of the two properties. So besides residential property, let's assume that you've got a multifamily property or an office space. They'll be using the income approach. They will generate an income worksheet, and it will have what your net operating income is, your expenses are. So we have to ask our property owners to provide us with their T12s, which are financial statements, rent rolls to show vacancy rates, and also their NOI and other expenses they might have. But that might not apply to you. So to kind of answer your question earlier, how much do we charge? Well, we charge only if we're successful at reducing your appraised value. There's no upfront cost. We charge 25% of the estimated tax savings before exemptions. So in that kind of second bullet, as an example, if your tax rate's 2.5%, that means for every $10,000 we reduce in appraised value, you would save about $250 on your tax bill. So if we reduce just $10,000, you would save $250 on your tax bill. Our 25% fee would come out to $62.50. What we do that kind of separates ourselves from our competition is we cap our fees for homestead properties. So if the property is your homestead, the most we would ever charge you is $150, right? For properties that have the over 65 exemption, then we charge at most $65 as well. If it's none of those, let's just say you've got a portfolio of rental properties, then we just charge strictly a 25% contingency fee. Also want to mention, we do work with a nonprofit called My City is My Home. So if you know anybody that is a low income individual that has a property, I believe that's valued at less than $200,000 or $250,000, we represent those properties for free. Last year, if you don't qualify for a free protest, but you were referred to us from the nonprofit, what we do with those clients is we donate half of our fee to the nonprofit. So last year we were able to donate, I think, around $18,000 from referrals that we received from that nonprofit. They're pretty active in San Antonio and Dallas as well. But if you do decide to protest, I encourage it. You should try it out at least one time by yourself. Just make sure, first thing, file your protest on time. Show up for your protest hearing when it's scheduled, because if you don't, you miss your hearing, they're not going to let you reschedule it unless you had an emergency. Stick to the facts, right? Don't get emotional. Don't cry saying taxes are too high or I lost my job. That doesn't really affect the market value of your property. They just got one job. They'll work with you as long as you're prepared and respectful. So I know this is mostly Williamson County. So I know one thing that I found that works really well in Williamson County is their sales data. They only use sales from January 1st through December 31st of the following year. So the best way that I've found that we can reduce values in Williamson County is to introduce sales from the first quarter of 2026 that they will add into their grid and see if it scores better. And if it does, they'll use it. Williamson County is very particular in that they have, let me stop sharing my screen real quick. They have a formula, and I think you could find it on the Appraisal District's website. And so when they have their grids, they'll have your subject property, and then they'll have comp 1, comp 2, comp 3, comp 4. And it's comp 1 scores the best. It's a 97% score. And then 94, 93, 92, whatever it might be. But what they'll do is, if you introduce a property to them, a recent sale, they'll plug it into their formula that they use. And let's assume that it's a 98% score. It's a great comp. They would have used it if they had it. They will use that comp and put it into their evidence packet and see if that helps you reduce your value, right? So Williamson County is very particular. They've got this down to a science formula that they stick to. So I always say that Williamson County is a little tougher because they might be more fair, right? Some counties, they're more willing to work with you. If I'm like, hey, this is, give me 20,000 off because I've got this great evidence, they might be like, sure, let's do it. I will say Williamson County is a little bit tougher. They don't really have a lot of flexibility. Their appraisers' hands are pretty tied when it comes to giving you an offer. And so you might hear people say Williamson County is tough. That just might mean they're fair. But they will take into consideration your evidence if you are able to bring some really strong evidence.
And Ryan's firm is, I personally have 2 properties in Williamson County that he helps protest, and he still saves
Yep.
us consistently. So
Yeah, I mean, if you don't protest, then you're stuck paying whatever appraised value they place on your property. So there's really no harm in trying. You should always protest every single year. Again, even if your value goes down, which if I think I looked at your properties, Kasey, I think one went down, one went up. We still protest both of them, and we'll see how we do. So,
and kind of on that note, and this is a really common question that we get. We have a lot of veterans that have the 100% disability rating with the VA, and they don't protest their taxes. And what ends up happening is they max it out. It's their homestead, but they max it out at that 10% every single year. And then they call us to go and sell 7, 8, 9 years down the road, and their assessed value is huge. And so buyers go and see that, and they see what their tax bill is going to be when they buy that house, and it scares them off. So even if you have big exemptions or anything like that, like Ryan's saying, protest, and make sure that you keep that lower. It will make your property much more desirable on the resale market later.
yes, and I'm trying to pull up the form for the notice of protest with Williamson County. It should come with or it should be on the back of the notice of appraised value that you receive. But let's see if we can just pull that up real quick and go through that. General appraisal form.
Line too, right?
Yeah, they're on there. Let's see.
The other
notice of protest form is a pretty standard form throughout the county.
The other bulk of our clients are in Travis County, Bell County, and then the outskirts like Hayes, Trop, etc.
Yeah, so that all the forms are the same, but there are different notice of protest forms. I think if your county has 120,000 residents or less, and so it just depends on the county, specifically on the population. Let's see here. I'm having trouble. So there is a forms tab on the Williamson County website. It's usually one of the first forms. Let's see. Are there any other questions in the chat though?
Rodney asked about even if it goes down. The good news about if it goes down, you can probably get them down a little bit more.
Yeah, again, if it goes down, great. That just means that they are taking into consideration how the market is moving, but you can still follow protests and try to get it down even more.
And just for some perspective on the market, so we've been a buyer's market and a balanced market now for a while. Real estate markets will shift like the pendulum of a clock, and we were a very strong seller's market for several years, and now we've been a very nice balanced leaning toward buyer's market. That pendulum will swing the other way, and the county will do and play catch up. And if it's your homestead and you have that cap, that 10% cap that they go off of, keeping it low before the pendulum swings the other way and things start increasing again at a healthy rate, that gives you the best baseline to keep it lower for many years to come.
And so, yeah, Kasey keeps talking about the 10% rule. So what he's referencing is the 10% homestead cap that applies to only homestead properties. And so just to kind of give you a clear example, if you have a homestead exemption on your property, your assessed value cannot go up by more than 10%, even though your appraised value can. So if your property is $200,000, next year they could say it's $300,000, but your assessed value, what you're actually getting taxed on, won't be more than $220,000, 10% more than the previous year, right? So we saw that happen when properties went up by more than 10%. And so the difference between the 300,000, the appraised value, and the 220,000, the assessed value, that's your homestead cap. So that $80,000 homestead cap for that property in particular. So when you go to a protest hearing or when you get your notice of appraised value, you'll probably see a couple different lines. The market value is the appraised value, and then the assessed value is if there's any exemptions in place that are getting it lower than it already is. And most of the time it's because of the homestead exemptions that are in place. But we've kind of caught up where It was triggered in 2022 when values jumped up 30 to 40%. Most of what I'm seeing now is values are the same. Your appraised value is your assessed value, because that 10% year over year is it's been caught up to the market value of the property.
Right.
But I do have a few clients whose appraised value is 600,000 and their assessed value is only 400,000, because the district tried to double their property from 200 to 400 and then 600. And so when they had their property at 200,000, 220, then 260, then 300. So it keeps it low. It's really good. And the other thing we've been doing as property owners, our right to vote, we increase the exemptions amounts over the last, I feel like every year we vote to increase the exemption amounts. Just a few years ago, a homestead exemption only gave you, I think, 25,000, and then it went to 40. Now we're at 100,000. I think the last vote we were at 120,000. Question here, do you give any discount if there are 2 or more families file with you? So we do have a referral credit. So we have a credit in place where you get a $15 credit on your bill if you refer a client and they mention your name. But as far as 2 or more families file with you, yeah, you'll get referral credits. But as far as multiple properties go, we used to have it on a tiered system where our standard fee was 35%. And then if you had multiple properties or commercial properties, it was lower. That got too confusing for us. So we reduced our fees to 25% just kind of across the board. But yes, if you do have a property owner file and they mention your name, then you'll get a $15 credit. And if you go to protesttax.com and sign up, it's very easy to do so. You'll put your name, your property address. If you want that property to be the property you protest, click yes. It'll ask you if you have additional properties. And then it'll say if you were referred by anybody. And then it even says unlimited referrals, just have them list your name. We don't have any specific referral links. We found that a lot of people would just put the name of the person that they referred you from.
And just to add to that too, I have used pretty much every property tax protest company here in town. We also had real estate agents that worked for us that were independent contractors for Ownwell, which is kind of a prop tech property tax protest firm. We don't get anything from Ryan. We don't get any special deals or anything. We send our business, and we do this with Ryan because they take care of our people, and their fees are way more reasonable than the other companies as well. And so I've had more success with my properties with Ryan than I did with all of those other companies. And his fee structure is what I consider the most fair for what we get to. So just wanted to throw that. This isn't a paid endorsement for Ryan.
No, yeah. Also, just kind of on that note, I'm not calling out any, individual protest company, but they might do that as well. If they don't have an exemption on the property and they'll ask, hey, give us your driver's license, and they'll file an exemption for you. Some firms will, I gotta be careful with what I say, right? Some firms will charge you 25% of what they save you. So we'll help you file your homestead exemption application for free. As I mentioned, if you retroactively add it back and you saved $6,000, I'm not gonna ask for 25% of whatever we save you, right? So, and we also wanna cap our fees for homestead properties, because that's, when we talk about contingency fees and percentages, if we say, hey, you're not going to spend more than $150 on a protest, that's usually an easier pill to swallow. We don't want to charge you, $600 if you just bought the home and all we do is submit the HUD or the settlement statement and get it down by a couple $100,000. It's just not fair, not how we're going to run our business.
Yep. So Ryan gets our referrals for that reason. And so that's why we do this with him instead of with anybody else. And yeah, Rodney, it's tough. We'll go to a situation where people are having a hard time paying their mortgage just for whatever life circumstances happened. And they that's one of the things we look at. We're like, hey, if you didn't file your exemption and you've been here for 6 years and you've never once protested, and so the county has you paying a really, really high amount, But by then, because it takes so long, you have to wait for the next protest cycle. You have to do that, and then you have to wait for your mortgage company to do the escrow analysis, and it's too late. So staying ahead of this, that's why we do this video and we put it out and we send out these emails every year. It's a real financial saver on people's budget every year.
It is. And again, if we don't reduce your value, we're not going to charge you anything, but you should protest it. Every single year, it's worth it. Especially with the markets the way they have been up and down. I know, Rodney, you just said you were going to hire us. Great. I think I found your home already on Williamson County website. So even if it looks like your value might have gone down about $45,000, let's see what we can do. Let's see if we can get it down even lower. So.
All right, you guys, anybody have any more questions or anything that's logged on here?
If you have any questions that you didn't get to or you just think about later, let us know. Ryan at protesttax.com. You can get a hold of me pretty easily. So Vincent, a couple more. I have a DV for Homestead on my home. Haven't noticed a change in taxes. Yeah, so I'll make sure that, you know, one part of the process of when we do file a protest, we get the evidence packets. We make sure all of your correct exemptions are applicable. DV4, that's pretty high up on the DV list, I think, right before just 100% DV. So unfortunately, you don't get 100% free property. You don't pay anything in taxes, but you do pay some just because of the qualifications. But we'll take a look at that, Vincent, and I'll make sure we have that right for you.
And big things for that, any veterans, you need your award letter for your rating. And if you're doing anything with a homestead, to have your driver's license with that as your home address. They're going to need to see that. So if you're a new home owner in Texas and you haven't updated your driver's license, you're going to want to do that for the exemption as soon as possible.
Yes. So when you do, if you are switching your homestead or applying for it for the first time, you've got to make sure your driver's license is updated and it shows that address, because that's one of the documents you'll need to submit. Or if you're active military, then you don't need to submit that document. But DVs or any veterans, you will need to. And
if you're watching this or you're on the call, you're going to see our information everywhere. But if you just have a question for us on the real estate side, your agent here, or just reach out to hello@jorgensonre.com or your real estate agent, and we'll get you taken care of with this too. So good deal.
Cool. Thanks, Kasey, for setting this up. And yeah, looking forward to seeing y'all sign up and working with you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Ryan. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Talk to you soon. Thanks. Take care.
See you.